Here's something that should be mathematically impossible, yet it's happening right in front of our eyes. The United States housing market just recorded its lowest transaction volume since 1995. Think about that for a second. Fewer homes are selling today than at any point in the last 30 years. We're talking about a country that's added more than 100 million people since the mid-90s, a country where families are bigger, jobs have shifted, and the population has literally exploded in growth corridors, and yet we're closing fewer real estate deals than we did when flip phones were still cool and the internet was mostly dial-up. At the exact same time, home prices are sitting near all-time highs. Nationally. Not just in New York or San Francisco. The median existing home price right now is hovering around $418,000. That's not a coastal bubble number. That's the dead middle of the country number. And prices haven't just held steady, they've refused to come down even as demand has collapsed. Fewer buyers. Sky-high prices. In any normal market, those two forces are supposed to cancel each other out. That's supply and demand 101. You learned it in 8th grade. I learned it in 8th grade. We all did. Yet here we are in 2026, watching the impossible play out in real time, a completely frozen market where almost nothing moves, prices stay absurd, and the average first-time buyer is now 40 years old. If you've tried to buy a home in the last 3 years, you already feel it in your bones. Something is deeply, structurally wrong. You open Zillow at 11 p.m. for the 16th time this week, save a listing you know you can't afford, and just sit there staring at the screen like it owes you an explanation. You can't quite put your finger on what's broken, but you know it is. My name is Nick, and today we're going to do something the real estate industry, the mortgage lenders, the big banks, and most financial media outlets genuinely do not want you to do. We're going to walk through every single domino, in exact chronological order, with the actual numbers, the cold math, and the human stories behind them. No spin. No sugarcoating. No. Now is a great time to buy. Nonsense. Just the unfiltered truth so that when you make your next move, whether that's buying, waiting, renting, or investing somewhere else, you're doing it with your eyes wide open and your spreadsheet in front of you. If you want to keep getting this level of real math breakdown every single week, hit subscribe right now, turn on notifications, and let's get into it. Because once you see the full sequence, the chaos stops feeling random and starts feeling almost inevitable. Let's start with the numbers that actually matter to your wallet. The median existing home price right now sits at approximately $418,000. 7 years ago, in 2019, that same median was $272,000. That's a 46% jump in a little over half a decade. Not in some ultra-luxury zip code. Nationally. Across the entire country. Now layer on mortgage rates. Today they're sitting around 6.5%. Sounds almost reasonable until you remember that in January 2021 you could lock in a 30-year fixed at 2.65%. That's not a small difference. That's a completely different financial universe. Let me make it painfully concrete with the exact same house. Take a $400,000 purchase price. 20% down payment, so you're financing $320,000. At 2.65% in early 2021, your principal and interest payment was $1,293 per month. At today's 6.5%, that exact same loan costs you $2,023 per month. That's $730 more every single month. For 30 years. That's not just. Rates went up. That's an extra $730 times 12 times 30 is equal to $262,800 over the life of the loan. For the identical house. Same carpet. Same school district that still gets a generous 6 out of 10 rating. Same yard the size of a generous parking space. And on top of that higher payment, the house itself now costs $146,000 more than it did in 2019. You are paying dramatically more for the loan and dramatically more for the house at the exact same time. This is not bad luck. This is not the market. This is the direct, traceable output of a very specific sequence of policy decisions, global shocks, human behavior changes, and structural failures that piled on top of each other like dominoes over the last 5 to 6 years. And once you understand the exact order those dominoes fell, the current frozen nightmare stops feeling like random chaos and starts feeling like the almost inevitable result of decisions made in emergency rooms and boardrooms while the rest of us were just trying to survive 2020. Let's go back to the beginning. The year is 2020. The world is literally on fire: pandemic, lockdowns, supply chains snapping like dry twigs, millions of jobs disappearing overnight. In an act of pure emergency financial panic, the Federal Reserve slashes the federal funds rate to essentially zero and announces it will buy $120 billion in bonds and mortgage-backed securities every single month. They are injecting liquidity into the system with the commitment of someone who just started the biggest bonfire in history, and is now slightly worried they might have used a little too much lighter fluid. By January 2021, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate hits 2.65%. The lowest level Freddie Mac had ever recorded since they started tracking in 1971. People who had been sitting on the fence suddenly realized they could afford dramatically more house for the exact same monthly payment they were already making. So they bought. And bought. And bought some more. But that was only half the fuel. COVID didn't just change the economy. It rewired what Americans actually needed from their homes. Suddenly your 700-square-foot city apartment had to serve as your office, your gym, your kids' classroom, your restaurant, your movie theater, and your only source of human contact. What used to feel cozy now felt like a sensory deprivation tank with a Wi-Fi password. Remote work exploded from under 6% of the workforce to over 18% almost overnight. Millions of people asked a completely reasonable question: if I can work from literally anywhere, why am I paying $2,800 a month to live in a place I don't even like anymore? So they left. Manhattan lost roughly 200,000 households in a single year. San Francisco, Chicago, Los Angeles, each shed tens of thousands. And all those households descended like a gold rush stampede on Austin, Phoenix, Boise, Nashville, Tampa, Raleigh, Denver, cities that already had tight inventory and suddenly faced a tidal wave of buyers holding pre-approvals, pandemic-era savings, and a desperate need for a home office that wasn't also their closet. National home prices jumped 37% between March 2020 and March 2022. Not over a decade. In 2 years. Austin climbed 61%. Phoenix 59%. Boise, Idaho, 53%. At the absolute peak, nearly 6,000 homes in a single month sold for $100,000 or more above asking price. For normal houses where normal people were going to cook dinner, argue about whose turn it was to take out the trash, and maybe host awkward Thanksgiving dinners. If you bought in 2020 or 2021, congratulations, you probably made one of the best financial decisions of your life almost entirely by accident. That wasn't skill. That was timing. Pure, beautiful, unrepeatable timing. But for everyone who wasn't in a position to buy during that narrow window, what happened next made the situation dramatically, brutally worse. By mid-2022, inflation was running at 9.1%, the highest in 40 years. So the Federal Reserve did what central banks do when they realize they've flooded the system with too much money. They slammed on the brakes. 11 rate hikes in 16 months. From 0.25% all the way to 5.5%. The fastest tightening cycle in 4 decades. Mortgage rates followed the worst possible trajectory. January 2022, 3.22%. October 2022, 7.08%. October 2023, 7.79%, the highest since 2000. On the exact same houses that people were paying $100,000 over asking for just 18 months earlier. At 7.79%, that $320,000 mortgage now costs $2,302 per month versus the $1,293 you could have had at the pandemic low. That's over $1,000 more per month. $363,000 more over the life of the loan for the identical house. To buy the median-priced home at today's 6.5% rate, you need to earn roughly $106,000 a year just to qualify under standard debt-to-income guidelines. The median household income in America is $83,700. The average American family is $22,000 per year short of qualifying for the average house. Every single quarter-point increase in rates kicked roughly 1.4 million additional buyers out of the market entirely. Not fewer buyers. Gone. Disqualified. Off the board. Home sales collapsed from 6.12 million in 2021 to just over 4 million in 2025, the slowest three-year stretch since the mid-1990s. We are selling fewer homes today, in a country with 100 million more people, than we sold in 1995. But here's the part that should legitimately break your brain. Prices didn't fall. The median price in 2024 hit $407,500, a record high that we have essentially been stuck on ever since. Demand collapsed and supply collapsed at exactly the same. And supply collapsed at exactly the same time, creating something the modern U.S. housing market had literally never seen before: a total, complete freeze. And the quiet villain holding the entire market hostage is something almost nobody talks about in polite company. Right now, roughly 51% of all outstanding U.S. mortgages carry an interest rate below 4%. About 20% are below 3%. If you bought in 2020 or 2021 and locked in 2.75%, you are sitting on a financial instrument that no longer exists in the marketplace. The bank will not recreate it. The market cannot offer it. It is gone forever, like a limited edition sneaker that sold out and was never restocked. So if you sell your house and buy another one today, you are not just moving. You are voluntarily surrendering the cheapest money you will almost certainly ever access in your lifetime and replacing it with money that costs more than twice as much. On a $400,000 mortgage, that swap costs you $730 more per month, every month, forever. That's $87,600 over the next decade in extra interest alone, just because you wanted to live somewhere different. Federal Reserve researchers put the average lock-in cost, the pure financial penalty of trading your old mortgage for a new one, at more than $65,000. So the rational homeowner stays put. In the house that's now too small. In the nursery that became a Zoom background. In the neighborhood where they stopped knowing their neighbors 3 years ago. Not because they want to stay. Because a spreadsheet is physically keeping them there. The Atlanta Fed found this lock-in effect reduces the probability that any given homeowner will list their home by 21 to 23%. FHFA researchers estimate it has suppressed 1.7 million transactions that would otherwise have happened. Active inventory remains 17% below 2019 levels. Months of supply hovers between 3.3 and 3.8. A balanced market needs 6. We are nowhere close. The market isn't broken in the sense that it's collapsing. It's broken in the sense that it has completely stopped moving. Like a door that won't open or close, just stuck, vibrating slightly, going absolutely nowhere. And if you want to understand who is actually getting squeezed the hardest, let's talk about someone specific. Let's call her Maya. She's 31 years old. Works in healthcare administration in a normal mid-sized city. Makes $74,000 a year, above the national median. No credit card debt. 760 credit score. She has saved $31,000 over 3 years of genuine sacrifice, skipped vacations, no new car, kept the same roommate longer than she wanted. By any reasonable standard, Maya is exactly the kind of person homeownership was designed for. Here's what the market offers her in return. The median home in her city is $385,000. With 10% down, her loan is $346,500. At 6.5%, her principal and interest payment alone is $2,190 per month. Add property taxes, $350, insurance, $150, and a realistic maintenance reserve, $320. Total monthly housing cost, $3,010. Maya takes home about $4,650 per month after taxes. Housing would eat 65% of her paycheck. She'd have $1,640 left for food, transportation, health insurance, utilities, student loans, and the occasional reminder that she is a human being who deserves a social life. She cannot afford this house. Not because she's irresponsible. Because the income required to comfortably buy the median home in her market is around $110,000, and she makes $74,000. The gap isn't a personal failing. It's structural. It's baked into the math. And there are millions of Mayas out there, financially solid, responsible adults being told by every cultural signal that they should own a home by now, while being quietly excluded by numbers that never appear in those signals. This doesn't feel like a crisis. It feels like opening Zillow for the 16th time this week and saving a house you know you can't afford, just so you have somewhere to put the feeling. It feels like watching your rent go up. Another $150 in March, and realizing your down payment timeline just got pushed back another 3 months. It feels like going to your best friend's housewarming party, genuinely happy for them, while involuntarily calculating what their monthly payment must be. It feels like being responsible by every measure that matters and still being systematically kept out of the one thing your parents treated as a basic expectation of adulthood. First-time buyers now make up just 21% of all purchases, a record low in 44 years of tracking. The historical norm is 40%. The median age of a first-time buyer is now 40. In the early 1990s it was 28. Buying at 40 instead of 30 costs roughly $150,000 in lost lifetime equity from the decade of appreciation you missed. Meanwhile, baby boomers now make up 42% of all buyers. Half of older boomers are buying entirely in cash. They sold the house they bought for $200,000 in 1998 that's now worth $700,000, pocketed the equity, and walked in with no mortgage at all. While the 32-year-old is trying to win a bidding war with nothing but a pre-approval letter and $31,000 saved. The downstream results are brutal. 84% of Gen Z aspiring homeowners are delaying at least one major life milestone because of housing. 29% are postponing having children. 18% are delaying marriage. 1 in 6 aspiring buyers, and 22% of millennials, have given up on homeownership entirely. Not paused. Given up. The median first-time buyer being 40 years old is not a quirky data point. It is the statistical fingerprint of an entire generation squeezed so hard and for so long that the defining marker of middle-class stability has been pushed from early adulthood into middle age. And every single institution with a financial stake in you buying a home has a structural incentive to tell you that now is still a great time to buy. None of them make money when you say no. Here's what almost never gets enough airtime: the shortage didn't start in 2020. It was assembled piece by piece over 15 years of underbuilding after the 2008 financial crisis. The U.S. is short somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 million housing units. After the crash, builders pulled back hard. For the entire 2010s, housing starts averaged about 990,000 per year against a historical baseline of 1.5 million. And what did get built skewed heavily toward the upper end of the market because that's where the margins lived. The traditional starter home, under 1,400 square feet, the entry point for first-time buyers, went from over 400,000 units a year in the 1970s to just 65,000 in 2020. An 80% decline. The house that was supposed to be the beginning of the wealth-building ladder for working Americans was essentially discontinued as a product. Then came the pandemic demand surge, then the rate spike, and now tariffs on steel, up 50%, aluminum, up 50%, and Canadian lumber, up 45%. That adds an estimated $10,000 to $17,500 to the cost of every new home. Builders are fighting back with incentives and rate buydowns to 4.5% or lower, but the hard truth is this: the supply problem took a decade to create. It will take at least a decade to meaningfully solve. There is no policy lever that builds 4 million homes in 2 years. At some point, someone always asks, is this 2008? No. Not even close. And the reasons it's different matter enormously. In 2006 to 2007, subprime mortgages made up 18 to 21% of all originations. Liar loans, interest-only products, negative amortization mortgages, all mainstream. The banking system was betting home prices would rise forever, using money borrowed against itself with zero margin for error. Today, subprime lending is roughly 3.6 to 4.2% of originations. The median credit score at origination is 758, 50 points higher than 2006. Only 2.2% of mortgage properties are underwater. Homeowners are sitting on $35.8 trillion in collective equity. Foreclosures in 2024 totaled 174,100. In 2008 they hit 2.3 million. The 2008 crisis happened because banks lent money to people who couldn't repay it based on home values they largely invented. Today the problem is almost the inverse. The lending is sound, the borrowers are qualified, the equity is real, and you still can't afford anything. Progress, technically. This is not a fragile market. It is a frozen, structurally constrained, deeply expensive market. A crash at least creates buying opportunities. A frozen market that slowly grinds sideways mostly just continues to exist, absorbing more and more of people's income while waiting for time to do what policy cannot. The thing everyone is waiting for is a significant drop in mortgage rates. Most forecasts have rates ending this year between 5.7% and 6.1%. Better, but still not enough for many. A Bankrate survey found 37% of homeowners say they need rates below 5% before they'd even consider selling. That threshold isn't where we're headed this year. The lock-in effect fades naturally over time. People have kids, take new jobs, get divorced, retire. The share of mortgages below 4% has already dropped from its peak of 65% down to about 48% today. That slow release is the most realistic path to a more functional market, but slow is the operative word. This is a 5 to 10 year process. Here's the twist almost nobody is talking about: a dramatic rate drop might not fix affordability. It could temporarily make it worse. Millions of buyers are sitting on the sidelines right now. If rates drop to 5% quickly, that wave of pent-up demand floods back overnight. But supply does not recover overnight. The 3.5 million unit deficit took a decade to create. So what happens when massive demand hits insufficient supply? Prices spike. The same dynamic that drove the 2020 to 2022 surge could partially repeat at a much higher base level. The most honest forecast is the boring one: a slow, multi-year correction where prices move roughly sideways while incomes gradually rise. No crash. No dramatic relief. Just time and grinding adjustment with a lot